Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1161. This daddy has pills. Do you have them? Open. Big Bear roared ferociously as a line of blood sword flew out along with that roar. The one sword breaking heavens chosen that had been building up energy for a long time finally burst forth. 10,000 sword lights exploded like fireworks in the sky. It was like 10,000 rays of rainbow that stretched through the sky, appearing all together in an instant. 10,000 streaks of sword light, all focused on a single person. Qiangshang Ju shrieked and his body revolved even more urgently, using both swords to defend continuously. At the same time, he spun like a tornado in the air, hoping to dodge the relentless assault of the 10,000 blades. Faced with the uncountable sword light and all-encompassing attack, Qiangshang Ju shrieked and roared in a miserable manner without ceasing. He who had been attacking in a frenzied manner a moment ago was now defending like an entrapped mad beast. Regret. That was the only thought in Qiangshang Ju's mind. Why did I choose to fight this bear in a frontal battle? Why didn't I use the stealth kills? I hate this. Big Bear's expression was cold and calm, but blood was still flowing out of his mouth continuously. His heart was as steady as a rock, and he continued wielding his sword, bringing out the best of the one sword breaking heavens chosen. All of a sudden, a wretched screech that didn't sound human rang out, one that nobody was able to determine who it came from. Following that, tens of blood arrows flew out in all directions, and a figure that looked like a blood porcupine could be seen in the sky. Everyone watching this intense battle in the sky did not even dare to breathe loudly in this moment. The victor of this fight would soon be revealed. Finally, the arrogant laughter of Big Bear rang out as he descended rapidly. No, it wasn't descended, he was instead falling from the sky. Quite obviously, Big Bear's strength had already been thoroughly depleted. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. You dang bear. This time, it was two extremely wretched voices that rang out together. That originally manly voice was now interlaced with a hysterical female voice. Qiangshang Ju's body had actually been turned into two parts. At an unknown time, this body had already been cut into two by Big Bear. And Big Bear's body had also completely lost its strength right after unleashing that devastating strike. Such an injury was enough to be lethal even for a supremacy-enduring heavens. The place where the two's body was separated was now oozing huge amounts of blood as if the blood was free. The two's figure shot down like a pair of shooting stars towards Big Bear's weakly falling body, the blades in their hands gleaming brightly and mercilessly. Eagle King roared with rage and soared into the sky, his body turning into a streak of lightning. However, it was clearly too late. Big Bear and Qiangshang Ju was simply too near to each other. Qiangshang Ju's male body grinned evilly as he plunged his long sword into Big Bear's left chest, before slicing downwards ruthlessly. At almost the same time, the female body stabbed her sword into Big Bear's right chest and sliced downwards, all the way to his abdomen. The Bear King's 5 organs were immediately exposed outside of his body. This was Qiangshang Ju's final strike. In truth, his fate had already been sealed in the instant he suffered the fatal/earlier. So right after this final strike, the two halves of his body also fell from the sky. Anyone could see that Qiangshang Ju, this frenzy blade enduring earth, was utterly finished. However, his opponent the Bear King of Tianfa, Big Bear, also did not have any hopes of survival. The final result was mutual destruction. Far away, Saint Venerable Bear's body trembled, and his face turned pale. Opening his mouth, he stretched out his hands as if to grab for something. However, they still fell weakly by his side. Saint Venerable Huang's lips also trembled as he sucked in a deep breath of air. "My king!" 3,000 bear tribe warriors roared together as their faces twisted with rage and grief. 3,000 pairs of eyes turned blood red together. If the king dies, the strange races shall be washed with blood to avenge his death. A snow-white sword was stuck in Big Bear's waist, and his muscular body was actually very nearly split in half. But as he fell from the sky, he used the last of his energy to right himself, landing firmly on his 2 feet. Blood poured madly from his mouth, but he still managed to stand up straight. His eyes were nearly devoid of life, but that arrogant gleam still flickered in his pupils. With 2 firm plops, Qiangshang Nuju's 2 halves also fell before Big Bear, and both pairs of eyes were staring venomously at Big Bear. Haha! Big Bear spat out a mouthful of blood and laughed aloud. "Freaks! Aren't you still going to die in front of this Lord Bear in the end? No matter how shameless you are, fighting 2 against 1, didn't you still end up killed by this daddy? Motherfuckers! Is having 2 heads and 2 bodies that amazing? After being split apart by a sword, aren't you still going to die? Feck you! We'll see who shall be the one to die first." Qiangshang Nuju breathed laboriously as the 2 separate halves actually crawled to each other and hugged together in the pool of blood. Staring hatefully at Big Bear, he panted, "Bear King, if this seat doesn't watch you die before my eyes, how would this seat be willing to leave before you? You want to watch me die?" Big Bear snorted, as if he'd heard the funniest joke in the world. Raising his hand, he reached for his waist with great effort and gritting his teeth, he began to pull out the long sword that was embedded in his muscles. With a loud clanging sound, he threw the sword onto the ground and took a deep breath as he gathered his organs and forcefully closed his wound. In a short moment, his face paled to the color of a piece of paper. At the same time, an extremely queer smile appeared on his face. "It seems you're about to be disappointed." As he said that, he used his other arm and took out a pill, popping it into his mouth. "Consuming pills? Ha 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 ha, you think that a pill would help a wound that serious? Or that it would buy you a few more seconds of life? That's impossible unless miracles really exist in this world." Qiangshang Nuju laughed mockingly at Big Bear. But in the next instant, he widened his eyes as if he'd seen a ghost. The truly inconceivable scene was indeed happening. In the instant that Big Bear consumed that strange medicine, a purple mist suddenly rose out of his body. Within the purple mist, there were traces of beautiful, jade-green colors. That was actually the energy of life force. The color of life. The radiance of life. The strange, purple spiritual qi continuously rose out of Big Bear's body, and Qiangshang Nuju discovered to his despair that the huge wound that had opened up had actually sealed up again. The blood had also stopped flowing, and his entire body was healing. Although the healing speed was not very fast, it was still at a speed visible to the naked eyes. The huge saber wound near his heart grew smaller gradually, and in the blink of an eye, it had already disappeared. Big Bear roared with laughter and raised his head. His body had actually completely healed. What was this if not an unbelievable miracle? The Bear King stretched his waist tentatively, then began to move his arms and kick around a few times, before finally recovering his senses. As he looked at Qiangshang Nuju's shocked and stunned widely staring eyes, Big Bear snorted and patted his B*TT happily. "Freak! You wanted to watch this bear daddy die? I apologize. I'll be letting you down. You want to fight with this daddy? This daddy has pills. Do you have them? Is it very infuriating? Are you very disappointed? Are you dying of anger? Ha ha ha. I understand how you feel. I understand it very much. Qiang Shang Nu Ju was so enraged that he actually managed an incoherent roar. All of a sudden, the two halves of his body jumped up like a pair of dead fish. Both hands pointed at Big Bear, and before he could say anything, his body fell down from the sky. His breath had stopped. But the four eyes were still staring forward with unresignation. He'd actually died with his eyes wide open. Big Bear roared with laughter and turned around, but his eyes were looking towards the north. At the same time, he thought secretly in his heart. Thank you, brother-in-law. You have given this old bear a second life. Strictly speaking, Qiang Shang Nu Ju's cultivation should be above Big Bear's. After all, his cultivation had been the result of gradual cultivation, while Big Bear had gained his through the help of pills and treasures. In addition, Qiang Shang Nu Ju had two bodies, one male and one female, and the combination of their strength was not as simple as just 1+1. Even without the stealth kills technique, Big Bear would still lose 10 times out of 10 times. If he had used the stealth kills technique, the chances of victory would still be slim even if Eagle King had joined hands with Big Bear. The strange race's frenzy blade enduring Earths were known for their brutality. How could they be taken lightly? But he'd miscalculated too many times in this battle. The first mistake was that he hadn't expected that Big Bear would have such a powerful divine weapon in his hands. The impressive Bear King sword was something that Jun Moxie had refined personally using the power of gold. The mysterious power of gold was something that already far surpassed the knowledge of this world. It was a proper divine art that should not exist here. A weapon that Jun Moxie made for his own brother-in-law would naturally not be shabby. Whether in terms of sharpness or sturdiness, the Bear King's sword was much superior to the frenzy blade enduring earth sabers that Qiang Shang Nu Ju was wielding. Any other weapon would have been destroyed long ago under the frenzied attacks of Qiang Shang Nu Ju, turning into scrap metal. But to the Bear King's sword, this kind of attack was completely manageable, even to the point of being too easy to handle. And this was even because Big Bear's own cultivation was at a disadvantage. If their abilities were the same, then with this weapon, whether it be attacking or defending, the fight would have ended long ago. The other miscalculation was that in these 10,000 years, there had been too many wars for seizing the heavens. The experts of the strange races had already faced the Bear tribe warriors quite a few times. They could be said to have quite a good understanding of the Bear tribe's skills and battle abilities, to the point of being very familiar with them. Especially the powerful, forbidden skills of the Bear tribe. The strange races were even more careful. Tian Fa's battle power was something that the strange races found the hardest to deal with in every war for seizing the heavens. It was also the thing that they were the most unwilling to deal with. Because the Tian Fa Xian beasts all had one common characteristic, which was that their life force was extremely strong. And they did not fear death as well. Even if they knew that they couldn't win, they would still do their best to drag their enemies to the grave with them. They could be said to be a horrifying meat-grinding machine that everyone feared. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1162. You. Come out. Let this daddy kill you to satisfy myself. And because of that, every generation of strange race experts would study Tian Fa's forces in detail, analyzing their strength, looking for their weaknesses from different angles to prepare themselves for battle. This was no doubt a wise move, since it was always a good thing to make ample preparations. But no one would have thought that the plan that they'd thought up of after spending so much effort would end up turning into a trap. An extremely lethal trap. The only thing was that the Xian beasts themselves were still in a state of confusion, not understanding just when they'd laid down this lethal trap for the strange races. The answer was actually very simple. From the day that Jun Moxie stepped into Tian Fa and got to know the various beast kings, his initial thought was that their battling style was too simplistic. It relied entirely on the strength and gifts of their individual bodies, fighting only on their instincts as Xian beasts. How could that be good? The ferocious tigers would pounce first, slamming their paws down, followed by a whip with their tails. This was undoubtedly a very effective attack. But no matter how effective an attack was, if it was repeated too many times, or if it dragged on for too long, then the threat the attack posed would be lessened greatly, and it would be easier for the enemy to discover the loopholes. Then, if an appropriate countermeasure was thought up, the Tian Fa Xian beasts would no longer be going into battle, but committing suicide. Young Master Jun would naturally not be willing to see his brothers-in-law's attack in such clueless manners. Previously, they didn't know better, and it was fine to do things simply. But now, young Master Jun was a person who'd lived 2 lives. He'd memorized quite a number of famous ancient war tactics in his previous life. And the Hongjun Pagoda also had a wealth of knowledge stored within it. And so, with Jun Moxie's great efforts, the battle tactics of the entire Tian Fa ferocious land was refreshed. Compared to the simple traditional methods of the past, this was a completely new look. And this new look, to the strange races who had been too familiar with the old battling tactics of Tian Fa, was now an extremely lethal death trap. Take for example a forceful tactic like a ferocious tiger pouncing on a lamb. The opponent would naturally come up with a countermeasure to deal with this kind of tactic. But just when they thought that they had found a way to break the forceful technique, they discovered that this was actually a trap, a scheming snake disguised in the skin of the ferocious tiger. And the actual killing tactic was actually an impossible development like monkey stealing peaches. What kind of feeling would that be? Truthfully, Jun Moxie had never really considered this far when he taught them these battle tactics. It was a complete coincidence and misfortune that the strange races ended up falling into the hands of it. Young Master Jun had truly not done this on purpose. Because these sneaky tactics had actually been designed to deal with the experts of the 3 holy lands. But in the end, the unlucky ones had actually turned into the strange races. Heaven makes fun of people. Ah! The foundations of this one sword breaking heavens chosen, that Big Bear used was actually the Bear tribe's sword technique, King's Sword 9 Firmaments. But after Jun Moxie's modification, it had completely changed. When Qiangshang Nu Ju saw Big Bear jumping up to meet him, he'd instantly thought of the Bear tribe's famed killing technique, King's Sword 9 Firmaments. This was the strongest and most unique killing technique of the Bear tribe. But after so many years, the strange races had already researched a method to break through this sword technique. And so, Qiangshang Nu Ju was fully prepared and confident, only waiting for Big Bear to throw himself into the death trap, before ending everything with a single, glorious strike. But Qiangshang Nu Ju would never have expected that this extremely familiar King's Sword 9 Firmaments would suddenly turn into a one-sword breaking heavens chosen that he'd never seen before. All of a sudden, the script that he'd memorized was thrown into the fire. No one would have been able to imagine the complicated feelings in Qiangshang Nu Ju's heart at that moment. Only one thing was certain. With Qiangshang Nu Ju's strength, if he'd discovered that this technique wasn't the King's Sword 9 Firmaments as he'd thought, Then even if the one sword breaking heaven's chosen was stronger, it wouldn't be able to kill him. At the most, it would only result in a serious injury. But both sides' swords were already almost touching when Qiangshang Nu-ju realized to his dismay that this wasn't the king's sword 9 firmaments. He'd been tricked. And so, Qiangshang Nu-ju instantly panicked. With their life under threat, who wouldn't panic? With Qiangshang Nu-ju's strength, if he hadn't panicked, he might not have lost his life even if he fell into a disadvantage. Even if he had to suffer a heavy injury, he would still make the Bear King pay with his life. With his mind in a mess and his stance flurried, it was already too late to try to dodge. The one sword breaking heaven's chosen's power had already locked onto him. At that time, if he still tried to forcefully use the stealth kills technique, it would mean that he would be abandoning his defense, and he would instead die even quicker. Left with no choice, Qiangshang Nu-ju began to counterattack frenziedly. Unfortunately, he was still too late by an instant. In a fight between experts, even the slightest millimeter of distance would mean a difference of 1,000 li, and the wavering of even half a breath would determine life and death. The one sword breaking heaven's chosen was not any normal technique. It was something that young Master Jun had customized for Big Bear. The moment this attack was unleashed, it would be able to raise Big Bear's attack power by more than twofold. The sharpness of the Bear King's sword, coupled with the explosive power of one sword breaking heaven's chosen, as well as Big Bear's Saint Emperor level Xian Qi and his powerful innate body, was able to cleave Qiangshang Nu-ju's body in half with a single slice. But what ultimately changed the ending of the story was the third miscalculation. The Bear King was actually carrying a heaven-defying pill that could bring one on the verge of death back to full strength. This was the part that made Qiangshang Nu-ju so aggrieved that he died. His strength was clearly far above his opponent's, practically more than twice in power. But ultimately, the duel had ended up in both suffering mortal injuries. Qiangshang Nu-ju was already extremely depressed that he wanted to die again, but after watching his opponent swallow a pill and recover back to full vitality without any problems, one could say that Qiangshang Nu-ju had been angered to death. With his deep cultivation, he should still have been able to endure for around half a day's time. But this sudden bout of anger and unresignation caused him to die with his eyes wide open. To a peak-level expert, such an aggrieved death was too sad. The fully recovered Big Bear stood there suavely and roared with laughter as he pointed with fingers, as thick as carrots, at the lineup on the strange race's side. You, and you, come out here. Let this daddy kill you to satisfy myself. You, come out. Let this daddy kill you to satisfy myself. What kind of bastardly words were that? Did we come all this way here just to let you satisfy yourself? If it was before, this sentence by the Bear King would definitely have incurred the curses from everyone. But at this moment, nobody dared to speak. The strange race army even seemed a little frightened, all of them taking another step backwards. Their eyes were filled with fear that was hard to disguise. This was especially so for Sichuan Pagua, who had just exchanged blows with Big Bear. He was so scared that he'd nearly fainted. Feck ah, that bear is actually so powerful. Luckily, I hadn't forced him too far just now, retreating the moment I realized that the situation wasn't good. Otherwise, looking at the cleanly sliced body of Qiangshang Nu-ju, Sichuan Pagua could not help but feel a chill down their backs. All the hairs on their body were standing up on their ends, and both faces paled to a stark white. The two halves, lying on the ground, could have been me. It's true that there were indeed some accidents in the last fight, and it's not as if there had never been any cases of a weaker person triumphing over a strong opponent. But the truly crazy part was that the bear had clearly received 2 deadly injuries a moment ago. His heart had been ripped, and even his body was almost torn apart. But to think that he could actually recover? And to actually be so lively still? That was too incredulous. This bear actually had pills that could preserve his life. In that case, what was the point in fighting him? Wouldn't that be seeking death? Our king is awesome. Our king is invincible. The 3,000 warriors of the bear tribe roared, their voices as loud as thunder. While one side celebrated and the other side was panicking, Eagle King was looking up at the sky with furrowed brows. The situation was still stable, but ever since they had landed here, only less than 2 hours had passed. There were still at least 6 more hours before the next batch of reinforcements arrived. But in just this less than an hour's time, the other side has already shown nearly 200 hell-enduring ghosts, and a frenzy blade enduring earth peak level expert. Fortunately, Fourth Brother managed to slay the strongest expert on their side, and temporarily stabilized the situation. But, who knows how many other frightening existences were still going to come out from that side in the next 6 hours. The two sides were currently staring each other down on a wide road. But if the other side's experts continued to pour in, and they decided to mount a frontal charge without consideration of the consequences, he and Big Bear might not be able to hold them off. Eagle King sucked in a deep breath and turned around to look at the 8 figures behind him, feeling a bit of calm surging through his heart. Perhaps, with the 8 Saint Venerable Seniors here, it might be possible to block this place for 6 more hours. But just at this time, a rumbling sound suddenly rang out from the distance. This kind of rumbling sound was unusually grand, and in just a short time, it had already far surpassed the noises made by the volcanoes. At the same time, a series of long and short strange sounds that were difficult to describe rang out from every direction, sounding like the wailing of ghosts. In an instant, the entire area seemed to be filled with an eerie, ghostly atmosphere. This eerie ghostly air was somewhat similar to the 9 Nether 14th Young Master's Nether Frost Chi. The 9 Nether 14th Young Master's aura was more heavy on the frost aspect, while this Een Chi was filled with the energy of the Nether Een. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1163. Endless Massacre. As that rumbling noise grew nearer, a look of joy appeared on the faces of the strange races, who were just in a state of panic and fear. Eagle King quickly spread his wings and flew into the air, looking into the distance. Even with his guts, he couldn't help but suck in a breath. From afar, an endless ocean of 2-headed monsters were riding on similarly strange horses, whipping away at their horses and approaching this side in a frenzy. In the air, before these monsters, there were hundreds of black little dots that were shooting through the air, as fast as lightning. These black dots in the air were clearly the peak experts of the strange races. Judging from the speed they were traveling at, the weakest cultivation of these people were at least frenzy blade enduring earth standards. The trouble is big this time. The bulk of the strange races and main forces are approaching at high speed. Everyone, into formation. Get ready for battle. Eagle King yelled loudly, flapping his wings. Behind him, the 3,000 eagle warriors instantly turned serious. As per their usual simulation training, they got into groups of 10 and stood in formation. Clang! They unsheathed their blades simultaneously. The bear warriors retreated 10 steps orderly, echoing the eagle warriors, also standing into their formations of 10. Under Big Bear's command, The Bear and Eagle clan troops merged and instantly formed into a new battle formation. With 20 in a unit, made up of 10 from the Eagle clan and 10 from the Bear clan. Holding their dazzling blades, they advanced uniformly. At this moment, everyone recalled Jun Moxie's teaching. As long as your comrades are still before you, then you have a responsibility to protect his back, with all your might and your life. As long as there are still enemies in front, as long as you still have a single breath left, then your only responsibility is to kill the enemy. You don't need to consider your defenses, and do not have to think about your safety, because your comrades will protect your backs for you, securely. The atmosphere was heavy and tense. Just like a giant barrel of gunpowder, the slightest bit of movement, the tiniest spark was enough to trigger a huge explosion that was enough to shake the entire world. Saint Venerable Lu and the rest were naturally of a different tier from Eagle King. They had already detected that troop of people that was approaching like a meteor earlier. They exchanged glances, a solemn look in their eyes. The current situation was extremely dire. The 8 of them no longer had any confidence in whether they would be able to hold this battle after seeing that bunch of experts that were about to arrive. The enemy has another 13 supremacy enduring heavens, 300 frenzy blade enduring ghosts, and almost 3,000 hell enduring ghosts. The rest, all have the strength of 9th level endurers. There should be more than 10,000 of them. A force like this. Saint Venerable Lu looked afar apathetically. Although he was not an eagle, there was a predatory look in his eyes, sharp and merciless. 7 brothers. I'm afraid that the day we have been waiting for our entire lives have finally arrived. 6 more hours. There are 6 more hours. Saint Venerable Bear had a solemn look on his as he looked longingly at Big Bear, who was at the front lines of the bear warriors. He spoke calmly. We must use our strength, our lives to stop these shuts for 6 hours. At least 6 hours. Even if our bodies are turned into powder, we must not let them pass. We must hang in there until backup arrives. We absolutely must not let those enduring heavens activate their stealth kill technique. If we decide to strike, then we absolutely must get at least 8 supremacy enduring heavens to perish with us. Then, using the effects of the heaven reversal pill, injure a few more, if we manage to succeed, and if any of us manage to survive, then there is only one thing to do. Use all your strength to get rid of as many frenzy blade enduring earths. Saint Venerable Lu's voice was calm and steady. In face of this impending, treacherous war, his mind wasn't the slightest disturbed. All right. Let us burn the rest of our lives till the end today. Instantly, all 8 brothers made preparations to strike. TNFA will inevitably be glorious because of us. Even if we die, we must not weaken the 10,000 years reputation of the ferocious land TNFA. Saint Venerable Lu said apathetically. As to the children, we do not have to care. And we must not care. Everyone must remember that in that moment you are distracted to look out for your descendants. You will cause a delay because of this moment of distraction. And this delay will cause immeasurable damage to our descendants. If we are distracted, we are not only not looking out for them, but we are also bringing harm to them. Fighting with our might, killing the most possible number of enemies. That is the only way we can endure the continuity of the bloodline of TNFA. The more we kill, the safer our descendants will be. Everyone understands this logic. Saint Venerable Lu's tone was more intense as he spoke. His eyes were gradually turning red. He had already begun to circulate all his Xian qi. They were only awaiting for that moment of explosion. A shrill whistle cut across the air. Then, hundreds of shrill whistles rang out. A powerful gust of air swept across the earth along with these shrill cries. Countless debris from the collapsed pillar of heaven's mountains was sent flying, filling the air with dust and dirt. Then, a voice cried out. The one in front. Which tribe from the divine sun is that? Why aren't you attacking? Why are you hesitating? Idiots! Why are you still not charging? It was as if this holler had some sort of magical power that could make one's mind tremble. After this yell, Shangchuan Pa Ku, Sichuan Pa Gua, and Deku Bushang, who was watching from afar, suddenly let out a shout at the same time. All their eyes turned bloodshot, as if they had lost their minds. But if you look carefully, you'd realize that there was a thick look of fear in their eyes. As if this yell from afar could make them wish for death anytime. As if they would rather die in battle than endure the yelling and condemnation from the person who had yelled. Then, a series of weird cries came ripping out of the throats of the countless strange races from ahead. The next moment, the strange races who were afraid and hesitant out of fear and panic earlier, began to charge forward like rapid torrents, unafraid of death. Within seconds, the battle that had calmed down temporarily instantly reached the boiling point. The current frenzy the strange races were in was comparable to that of the Bear Clan's warriors earlier. Thankfully, they were facing the Eagle Bear army. That was not inferior to the strange races in terms of their battle inclination. At this moment, Eagle King, Bear King both glanced towards a faraway distance. Their gazes sharp and resolute, with deep emotions. They were looking in the direction of Tien Fa Forest. Just one look. One look. We probably will not be able to return back home. The faraway hometown, just let me take one more look. Then, they quickly snapped their heads back, a burning, furious look in their eyes as they look at the approaching strange races. The next moment. Kill. For Tien Fa. For the glory of Tien Fa. Kill all these scum. Bear King roared, straightening his back. Boom. Thick smoke emerged from his body. As they faded away, this Bear King of Tien Fa had returned back to his beast form, into a giant bear that was 3 zhang tall. The arms of the giant black bear were about twice the thickness of a regular human's thighs. He reached behind his back, pulling out an enormous blade. The blade was almost a zhang long, 1 meter in width. Upon first glance, it resembled a giant door. Then, Bear King's right hand put the sword into a round metal pillar, locking it in place. This metal pillar was about 2 zhang in length, and about the thickness of a human being. With a click, the giant blade spun and was attached onto this metal pillar. An unimaginable peerless weapon was formed in Bear King's hands. There were only 2 people who were able to wield a weapon like this in the entire Tien Fa forest. Bear King Big Bear, and Old Bear King Saint Venerable Bear. Other people were really incapable of using it, including Jun Moxie himself. Because this thing was truly too gargantuan, too colossal, and too heavy. After the blade was connected with the metal pillar, the entire thing spanned for 4 zhang. It weighed 1,600 kg. If it wasn't for Bear King's strength as the Bear King, any regular experts would find it difficult to even lift it. For this blade, Big Bear had begged Jun Moxie for 3 whole days. Then Jun Moxie reluctantly smithied this unrivaled and unmatched weapon for him. This blade was specially customized for Big Bear after he returned to his original form. A ferocious weapon like this was an absolute killing machine for massacring in a battle. Where the blade passes, it was like cutting grains. A clean, complete patch was taken out. Bear King held on to his weapon and looked at the impending strange races coldly, a ruthless and bloodthirsty look in his eyes. At this moment, Big Bear was like a god of war, overlooking the common lives. Near. They're nearer now. Big Bear raised his right hand, pulling his blade out and swinging it forward. He yelled, "Charge! Everyone, move! Kill all these grannies for this daddy." Behind him, 6,000 warriors let out a roar at the same time. Big Bear cackled, taking a huge step forward. He was like a violent tornado, his heavy footsteps sending rumbles through the ground. It was only 3 steps. Just 3 steps. And Big Bear had already charged into the sea of strange races. He let out a loud roar and swung his long blade horizontally, like a bolt of lightning. With frightening might, he took the lead and beheaded them endlessly. Ah! Hey! Big Bear hollered excitedly, the muscles on his arms bulging. The light from his blade formed a dazzling ring. Endless massacre. Hop! 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 Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1164. Why didn't you keep your word? Neatly, the over 40 strange races in front and beside Big Bear instantly turned into 90 different pieces. Gushes of fresh blood shot into the air like fountains. Big Bear did not stop, continuing to advance with big steps, but the huge saber in his hands came swinging in the reverse direction. But there was no difference in the results. The Bear King right now wasn't using any technique, he was just swinging his saber left and right. As he repeated this motion, decapitated heads flew into the air. Ear-splitting tragic screams and shrieks filled the air. Behind, 6,000 Tianfa warriors were armed with a terrifying, bloodthirsty sabers. Although they were not as exaggerated as Big Bear's, they were longer than the usual weapon and 3 times the weight. They slaughtered their way through in the same manner. Wherever they passed, blood stained the skies and heads and dismembered limbs were sent flying in all directions. Under everyone's watchful eye, Big Bear's humongous body suddenly rose into the air. He swung his saber close to his neck, then did a spin midair. Another powerful stroke was already sent out. Brothers, is the battle today satisfying for everyone? Big Bear's loud laughter shook the heavens. Yes. Extremely. 6,000 warriors all bellowed in laughter, with fresh blood spewing everywhere. Their faces were still filled with excitement. Is it satisfying enough for you guys? Another 2 horizontal strokes sliced through the crowd. Not enough. Far from enough. Everyone roared in unison. Do you want it to be more satisfying? Big Bear bellowed, laughing into the skies. His saber flashed before him and blood and heads went flying into the sky. Yes. If you want, then continue to kill all of these bastards. See if you'll find it satisfying enough after you've killed all of them. Big Bear let out a loud howl. Right now, he was in a complete state of excitement. Right now, aside from Massacre, there was nothing else in Bear King's mind. Kill all of these bastard scum. Kill all of these bastard scum. They bellowed loudly. The 6,000 warriors were even more eager for battle. All of them charged forward with all their might. Thousands of sabers formed into a dazzling rainbow that covered the earth, creating a rain of blood that connected the heaven and earth with each chop. The strange race's tragic cries became a chorus, thousands dying under their sabers the moment they came into contact. But it was as if these bunch of 2-headed monsters had completely lost their minds this time. All of them charging forward with bloodshot eyes, howling non-stop. Even though they knew they were no match for the enemy, they continued to attempt to outnumber their enemy fearlessly. Big Bear took the lead, his giant build like a sturdy iron tower, moving forward in the crowd at high speed. Some of the strange races with lower cultivation were stomped by his giant foot with a crisp paw, as if a toad that was filled with air was stepped on, completely turning into minced meat. Clang! Big Bear's body jolted. He raised his eyes and looked straight ahead, only to see a figure stumbling back. Debauchee. This was the only obstacle Big Bear had met since the moment he charged through the masses. And also the only strange race that was able to stop Big Bear's rapid massacre. Scum! Announce your name. Big Bear bellowed. The air quaked because of this. The curves appeared on the pillars of blood that was shooting into the air before it rained down again. Idiot! Wretched black bear! This seat is debauchee. Debauchee had given his full strength to gamble a hit against Big Bear, but the long sword had already broken into 8 pieces from Big Bear's retaliation. Both his hands were covered in blood. Blood was even dripping out from the corner of his mouth. He may not be weak, but compared to the king of the Bear clan, who had already regained his most powerful form, there was still a huge disparity. You're not going to feck after you obtain the pants? Your granny. What sort of bullshit name is this? I only thought you scum were sick, but turned out even your names are this sick. Big Bear widened his eyes. Feck your old master. Don't tell me you go around be *TT Nike'd every day. You're even more disgusting than those 2 who wears their torn clothes on the wrong places. Why haven't you gone and hung yourself when you've seen this granddaddy? What else are you waiting for? Do you really need this granddaddy to go through the trouble? Debauchee was so angered by Bear King's words that his eyes turned red. He cursed almost hysterically. Baka! Hit on me? Feck! I have no interest in hitting on scum like you. Even if you ask me to hit on your sister or your grandmother, it's all useless. Big Bear narrowed his eyes menacingly. Come. 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 Let me chop off your head. And send you on your way. Then, his huge saber suddenly came swinging down. The whistling of the air could be heard as his saber sliced through it. At this moment, the intense wind that was brought along with this saber had overpowered the sound of the northeast winds that were howling away. Debauchee only felt like everything in the world had vanished, and all that was left was this murderous saber. Shut! He knew that the opponent had an overwhelming aura, although his Xian cultivation was not that far off. But at this moment, he was completely frozen by the overbearing aura of the enemy. When facing an expert like this, being intimidated was basically losing half the battle. How could Debauchee dare to receive this blow? He yelled and a puff of thick smoke suddenly exploded and covered the area. Bear King! Do you, a king of Tien Fa, have the guts to fight me one-on-one? Stealth kill technique. Big Bear instantly recalled Eagle King's reminder from before. The stealth kill techniques are not suitable for a chaotic battle. He couldn't help but guffaw loudly. Sure. Don't tell me I'm supposed to be afraid of a strange race scum like you. Debauchee was elated, quickly changing his saber and smiling sinisterly. Bear King. As expected. You have enough guts. You are a man. Come with me. Then, he rose into the air. For the sake of leading Bear King to follow him, he intentionally left a trail of black smoke, hinting, I have left this way. Come over quickly. Let's fight one-on-one. Let me conquer you as the weaker one in this battle and chop off your bare head. The stealth kill technique was indeed unsuitable for chaotic battles, especially large-scale ones like the one right now. Thus, the moment debauchee go the enemy's promise, he instantly retreated away from the battle area, springing 50 zhang away in an instant. He had complete confidence that as long as Bear King gave pursuit, he would be able to toy with him till death. Bear King looked at him condescendingly. A cunning look flashed across his eyes. He suddenly hollered, "I'm coming." Debauchee was overjoyed. After Big Bear had shouted that sentence, he turned around and charged towards an area that had more strange races congregated together, swinging his giant saber about. Wherever his saber passed, at least 100 strange races screamed from their decapitated heads. Then, Bear King leapt into the air and landed in a position which was most concentrated with strange races. He lowered himself and swung his saber while spinning around like a screw. His saber formed into a bright ring of light around him, advancing with bursts of fresh blood. Endless blood spill. Hop! 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 Countless of dismembered body chunks flew into the air, along with endless tragic shrieks. Debauchee only noticed something was amiss when he had fled more than 100 zhang away. He was so furious that he almost fell out of the air. "Bear King! You're shameless. You're despicable. Why you? We agreed to fight one-on-one. Where is your trustworthiness? What sort of man are you?" Debauchee was practically about to vomit blood. He was so furious that he was trembling. If he had stopped Big Bear where he was, why would his own clan men be killed in hundreds in this instant? This bastard! To think that he did not keep his words. Where is his warrior spirit? Big Bear turned a deaf ear and did not answer, excitedly waving the saber in his hands about. Kill! An entire sea was eliminated. Then with a spin and a yell, feck! Another sea was yet again annihilated. Killing to his heart's content. Debauchee was so furious that his lips were trembling. He flew back with a whoosh. Pointing to Big Bear, he scolded. "Big Bear! Do you still have the demeanor of a king? Absolutely disgraceful, despicable, shameless. Are you still a man?" Right now, he was still in a concealed state, so only his voice could be heard from the air. But Big Bear couldn't see him. But he really shouldn't have spoken in front of Big Bear. Big Bear looked from the corner of his eyes, still not saying a single word. The only reply he gave was a horizontal slash of his saber. Debauchee cried in shock. Bear King barely missed him. He scolded angrily. "Bear King, you despicable!" Ah! Because at this moment, the saber in Big Bear's hand began to spin like a windmill, turning into net of saber. And he yelled, "Some of you, come, shatter the air for this daddy." The moment he gave his order, the few nearby warriors of the Bear clan instantly bounded over. Their bodies had yet to arrive when numerous saber light had already completely sealed up the region that Bear King had sealed off with his single saber. Ah! Debauchee howled tragically. A burst of fresh blood appeared out of nowhere in the air. "Feck your granny! This is in the midst of a battle. Who has the mood to fight one-on-one with a scum like you who hides about? Fecking hell! All of them in Tien Fa Forest always say this daddy is lacking in the brains department. But over here, even you scum really think that this daddy is an idiot. Hey! Whether this daddy is a man, you know, only this daddy's harem has the rights to say whether this daddy is a man or not. Idiot!" Big Bear hollered proudly. On the tip of his saber, there was a person hung on it. Debauchee. The lord of the Deku family of the strange races was being hung midair. like a piece of tattered cloth. There was a huge hole in his chest that skewered across both his bodies. Under the inescapable net of the warriors of the Bear Clan and Bear King, debauchee, whose location had been determined, finally couldn't dodge and was skewered by Big Bear. Right now, the four eyes on debauchee's two bodies were burning infernos. They twisted angrily to glare at Big Bear. You! Why didn't you keep your words? The feck! You're still harping on this issue even until now. Looks like you're more stupid than this, Daddy. Big Bear let out a cry of surprise. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1165. So this is how an excellent Moron is born. Debauchee only had one breath left, but he continued to glare unyieldingly, struggling as he questioned. You! Why didn't you keep your words? Big Bear met his glare with an equally unrelenting look. He suddenly stuck his huge weapon into the ground, picked up debauchee's crippled body, and smashed it mercilessly against a huge boulder nearby. Blood splattered everywhere. Then, he lifted his blade and used the back of his blade to hammer down continuously. As he hammered, he cursed. How is this Daddy not keeping his words? Aren't I keeping my words with you right now? Is this not fighting one-on-one? Keep your words. Keep your words. Keep your granny. Keep your whole family. Keep your... After over 10 rounds of chopping, this strange race that kept his words had turned into a pile of minced meat. Big Bear even spat and said tauntingly, "Did you really think this Daddy has something wrong in his head? To keep my word with a strange race like you? Feck you. Are you taking me for a fool? Hey! Our king is great." A few bear warriors threw flattery at this shameless king. What are you rambling about? Hurry up and continue to kill. What bullshit trust? To clamber on your enemy to talk about keeping your word on the battlefield. The brains of this bunch of two-headed scums are really... Big Bear rolled his eyes. When this scoundrel was in his mom's belly, she definitely suffered a fall. And not just once. Otherwise, this scoundrel wouldn't be this moronic. He is a fecking natural moron. Goodness. What an excellent one. The faces of the other bears twitched a little before they dragged their knives and continued charging towards the other side of the battlefield. Big Bear laughed heartily, but was suddenly left stunned. Because he had clearly heard, from the other side of the battlefield, the furious yelling of a few bear warriors. Did your mom fall when you were in her belly? And there was a strange race that foolishly replied. What? What, your old master? Looks like she really suffered a fall. Then, a tragic scream was heard. Big Bear's face darkened. It didn't take long for the entire battlefield to completely turn into the stage for the bear warriors to exhibit their loud voices. They were yelling loudly everywhere. The only pity was that their lines were a tad simple, and the contents were the same. Did your mom fall down before? The ferocious blade went chopping down with every questioning. Series of tragic shrieks rang out ceaselessly. Then, it completely became a case of, did she fall before? The bear warriors were completely spirited as they cursed, feeling more and more pleased the more they fought. This swearing phrase was extremely satisfying and great for venting anger. As they cursed and slaughtered their way through, their strengths were also raised by a few levels. It felt so great. It is really satisfying. Ah. Whoosh. Eagle King spread his wings and sent the blood that had stuck to his wings flying out, flying over to where Big Bear was. As he chopped down 6 strange races, he asked curiously, "Fourth brother, what did you say earlier?" Where have you fallen down before? What does it mean? Why haven't I understood it even until now? Fall your goddang head. Scram. Big Bear didn't feel the least proud of himself. Those scoundrels from his clan were too embarrassing. He had no idea which one of them spread this swearing, and it just spread like wildfire. It was fine if it was any other intelligent-sounding phrase, but this was something that clearly hurt his great reputation. Ah! This is too damaging to my image. After this battle, I definitely have to mete out harsh punishment. But then again, this swear from brother-in-law doesn't have a single curse word in it. It's really worth learning from. He was just brooding over this matter when Eagle King came over pry about the commotion. So how could he be nice to him? Upon hearing this, he gave him a glare, turned around and went charging into the sea of enemy with a roar. Did I offend or piss you off? Why are you scolding me too? What bad luck? Eagle King was stunned. He grumbled a little before following in suit to kill the enemies. Naturally, almost 40,000 strange races were no small number. But the strength of Tian Fei's warrior were undoubtedly multiple folds of them. Under the joint forces of the Eagle and Bear clan, slaughtering with all their might, the overall numbers of the strange races were rapidly reducing, like ice being melted by the blazing hot sun. But in the short duration both sides had clashed. There were hundreds of injured members on Tian Fei's side, of which there were a few dozen members who had sustained heavier injuries and were forced to use the Heaven Reversal Pill to regain their strength before continuing to slay the enemies. The effects of the Heaven Reversal Pill were truly impressive. No matter what sort of injuries or what level of exhaustion, as long as one breath remains, using one pill would allow them to return back to full strength, with no side effects. This medicine is truly rare. If there is any flaw to it, it was only the fact that it could not be taken again for an overly long period of time. Only one pill could be consumed in the duration of a month. Reusing the pill during this time limit would result in no effect. The second pill will only be able to show its effects a month later, after the body has completed its circulation and got rid of all of the medicinal effects. This was what young Master Jun felt was a flaw. Otherwise, if he gave each of the warriors hundreds of pills, wouldn't they be able to keep on massacring the enemy without a stop? Then were there any risks for the war for seizing the heavens? Was there anything that could not be resolved in the world? But the reality was that such great things did not exist in the world. No matter how miraculous the medicine was, it would have its limits and restrictions. The remaining few thousands of strange races left in the battlefield still continued to resist and fight back. More than 90% of their troops have already died under the blades of the Eagle Bear army, turning into minced meat on the ground. Kill. The Battle of the Divine Sun. The goal is to seize the heavens. The Xian continent will ultimately belong to the Divine Sun clan. A resounding, terrifying voice rang out across the battlefield, and a figure had appeared in the air above. This voice was unusually eerie. There was an odd, unique melody to his tone. It was the supremacy enduring heavens that spoke earlier. The strange race leader that had just arrived. And the strange race's craze was also because of this one sentence. This person had the supreme power in this entire region of the strange races. With this loud declaration, his figure had already begun to charge toward the ground. His blade light had arrived before him, slicing down like an endless rainbow. Numerous bear warriors cried out, injured by him. With a more than 10 zhang distance, he managed to wound saints with the chi of his blade alone. It was clear that the cultivation level of this person had already reached the levels of saint venerables. Then, another 12 figures appeared consecutively in the air. In a flash, they came charging down to the ground with sinister grins on their faces. There was a chilling blade light in their hands. That was the blade of the enduring heavens. Like bloodthirsty demons, it opened its big mouth and revealed its sharp fangs. The blade of the enduring heavens represented massacre. Destruction. If they really landed, the warriors of the Eagle Bear clan would definitely suffer destructive hindrance. The strength of one person alone may not be able to alter the current situation, but if over 10 Saint Venerables joined forces and struck, then it was definitely enough to change the entire situation. What more? Even if it weren't for these 13 superpowers, there were hundreds of Frenzy Blade enduring Earths arriving. Right now, the strength of Tien Fa was a little lacking compared to the strange races. But there were almost 6 hours more before the second wave of backups arrived. And during this period of time, the numbers of the strange races would only increase drastically. With the current situation, the battle that the Eagle Bear army was about to face was on the brink of determining life and death. Tien Fa, last forever. Just at this moment, suddenly, one of the bear warriors who had already used the heaven reversal pill suddenly roared and leapt into the air. He turned to his original form midair, roaring and went hacking down with all his might towards the supremacy enduring heavens that was on the way to the ground. That supremacy enduring heavens let out a cold chuckle. The female voice remarked condescendingly, "A small fry like you dares to try and stand out?" He calmly swung his sword, clanging against the bear's sword. It flew out of his hands and turned into metal shavings in the air. But that bear warrior had clearly prepared to stake his life on this. The moment he leapt into the air, he had already sent all his chi bursting out. Although his sword left his hand, his humongous body continued to fly forward. The giant bear continued to snarl, spreading his huge paws, and went lunging at the supremacy enduring heavens. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. 3 flashes of blade light, and the arm and right leg flew off from his body, fresh blood spraying about. But he continued to roar, drawing close to this supremacy enduring heavens with all his might. Then, Tien Fa. This bear warrior roared hysterically, grabbing onto the blade that was stuck in his own chest with his only remaining arm. He cackled manically and exploded, turning into meat chunks that rained from the sky. This violent explosion completely covered the area of the surrounding 10 zhang radius. Many strange races that did not manage to dodge the meat chunks were severely injured. That supremacy enduring heavens who was at the center of the explosion let out a furious growl, unable to control its body that was still midair. He was sent flying out by this tremendous impact of the explosion. This supremacy enduring heavens had the cultivation of a saint venerable. The self-detonation of a saint level may make him appear pathetic, but it was still not sufficient enough to injure him. But in the brief moment he stumbled back due to the force of the explosion, it was enough to change the entire situation and bring it towards an unpredictable path. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1166. Life Spatial Lock. That bear warrior was well aware of the disparity between himself and the enemy before him. He had not hoped to perish with him. His intention was to use his own self-detonation to vie for some time, using the last bit of his strength to stall him for a while, so his comrades would be able to prepare themselves, so they could slay more enemies. Using his own life, his own spirit, turning it into an explosive force, keeping this god of death out. Even if it was just for a second, his sacrifice was worth it. Perhaps it was because he managed to vie for this 1 second for his comrades, to allow them to have some time to prepare themselves. Because a saint venerable like this, The damage he would cause the moment he landed in the concentrated troop of TNFA warriors would be destructive. There may be many comrades who would be killed, not even having the time to use the heaven reversal pill. Whereas, he had already used the heaven reversal pill. Had already died once. I picked this life back. If it can help the rest get that little chance of survival, it's worth it. Blackie. Big Bear roared hysterically, both his eyes turning red, as if blood were about to spill from them. He charged towards that direction, slaying everything in his path. 2 waves of fresh blood sprayed from wherever he passed, like a giant boat cutting across the surface of the water. Into formation. Everyone, get into formation. Don't be in disarray. Get into formation and slaughter all these scum. Seek revenge for our brother. Eagle King shouted. His grief and indignation in his voice was about to rip and tear his throat. Revenge. Revenge. The sacrifice of this bear warrior completely incited the ferocious nature of all the warriors of TNFA. And Eagle King made the most correct choice at this moment. Getting into formation. The absolute killing formation that brother-in-law had imparted. Every 10 men as an individual unit. And the little bit of timing for them to get into formation was exchanged for with the life of the bear warrior that had sacrificed himself. Although it was just a short bit of time. If not for that little bit of buffer time, they would have been annihilated before the formation took shape. Even the most powerful formation was nothing if it didn't take form. It was also at this moment when an unusually sharp whistle began to sound, like a sharp knife slicing across the air. It shot towards that supremacy enduring heavens that was in the midst of stumbling backwards. That supremacy enduring heavens who was sent flying back from the impact of the self-detonation was so angry he was about to vomit blood. He had rushed the entire way over, and ordered the sea of men to attack to drain the enemy's energy and mess up their formation. He had sacrificed almost 40,000 men just so that when he arrived, he could easily charge right into the enemy's formation that was already in disarray due to the drawn-out battle. Then wipe them all out, before leading all the 10,000 forces behind him forward, into the Xian continent. Setting up the first military base for the strange races in the Xian continent, guarding this exit that was already opened and had no threat from the volcano. As long as the rest of the troops arrive, they would have a great chance at invading the Xian continent. He had complete confidence that the chances of victory were completely impossible, even with 5,000 men against TNFA's warriors, because TNFA's warriors were stronger. But relying on the advantage in numbers would definitely be able to mess up their formation. And this was the only thing he wanted. Even an expert like him was incapable of breaking an orderly, formed formation. Even a Saint Monarch cannot belittle the strength of 1,000 experts united as a single force. But as long as the basic formation has been messed up, he would be able to find an opening and make use of the situation, using the smallest bit of strength to gain the greatest results. As to those 50,000 fellow race members from earlier, in his eyes, they were merely cannon fodder. If they die, they die. As long as there is a price and value in their death, then so what if another 50,000 men die? His great plans were so close to succeeding. But at the last minute, it was ruined by an ordinary member of the bear clan with a near-saint cultivation. This wretched black bear, to use such an extreme method like self-denotation, successfully stopping my footsteps, ruining all of my perfect plans. How could this high and mighty supremacy enduring heavens accept this sort of outcome? However, it was still all right. Looking from the current situation, it could be determined that there were not many high-leveled experts present in this battle even though they were strong. As long as he joined forces with all the other supremacy enduring heavens and charged their way through, victory would still be theirs. They'd just have to use more energy. That's all. This supremacy enduring heavens instantly felt slightly better when thought of this. Even if that stupid bear figured out my plans, he can only stop my steps temporarily. A fool is still a fool. Then, just when he made his decision and was about to fly back and join the rest of the supremacy enduring heavens, there was a chilling gust of wind that came cutting through the air. Instantly, he couldn't move his entire body. This supremacy enduring heavens was shocked. Life spatial lock. He practically shouted these 3 words with a trembling voice. This was a type of spatial lock that could only be used by Saint Venerable experts. And it was also the most tyrannical and dangerous type. One burnt their own life force for the most complete communication with heaven and earth to completely lock up a particular space. This method was undoubtedly the most effective when used as a sneak attack. If the other party was prepared, it would be completely pointless. As an expert of the same level, no one would foolishly stand there for you to lock away. But at this moment, his supremacy enduring heavens was completely unguarded. That supremacy enduring heavens had already carefully observed the entire battlefield. There were obviously no Saint Venerables around. Why did one appear at this sort of crucial timing? Dao Chuan, how have you been? An eerie, murderous voice suddenly rang out. A figure appeared before him. In his hand, a long, shiny saber. It was Saint Venerable Lu. As he spoke, he swung his blade down mercilessly. He did not give this supremacy enduring heavens any time to react. There was only an ice-cold look in his eyes. Dao Chuan, I wonder if your holy infant can escape from this life spatial lock I've created? This supremacy enduring heavens was called Dao Chuan Kenju. In the previous war for seizing the heavens, Saint Venerable Lu had met him and that was how they knew each other. So it was you god-danged dear. Idiot. To go as far as to take advantage of someone's difficulty, launching such a despicable sneak attack. Dao Chuan Kenju let out a shout of terror. He naturally recognized this old rival from 500 years ago. But he didn't have the time to be angry. He suddenly gritted his teeth and decisively yelled. Enduring heaven body destroying cloning method. Pop! Blood poured out from his mouth. Then all his hair began to stand. His face also began to turn deathly pale. But his qi and xian skills and suddenly increased exponentially. It was as if he was about to break through this life spatial lock that Saint Venerable Lu had set up any time. The enduring heaven body destroying cloning method was a skill that the strange races used when going all out. The moment it was activated, it allowed their strength to increase by 3 folds. Enough to kill the enemy. But after that, their internal organs would definitely be damaged, and even lose their ability to function. It'll need a long period of nursing for possible recovery. But Dao Chuan Kenju was not trying to kill the enemy, but to break free of this life spatial lock. Aside from this self-destructing method, he couldn't think of any other second way to rip his way out of the life spatial lock that was set by a similar leveled Saint Venerable. He no longer had any other choice. But Saint Venerable Lu's saber still came down mercilessly. Dao Chuan Kenju used all his might to turn his head. Whoosh! The huge blade went slicing right into Dao Chuan Kenju's shoulder. Slicing into both his bodies at the same time. However, because both the bodies had their backs facing each other, the knife had cut one on the left shoulder, and the other on the right shoulder. Dao Chuan Kenju used the secret technique of the strange races to boost his strength and was indeed a lot more stronger than Saint Venerable Lu. The toughness of his physical body had also increased 3 folds in the same instance. The saber that was originally enough to cut him into 2 ultimately failed to do so. but it still managed to obtain an impressive outcome. From the shoulder, the wound went all the way down to the chest, almost reaching the stomach. The blade chi surged in violently. Debauchee Kenju's organs were practically turned into a pile of mush. There were 2 sets of 5 viscera and 6 bowels on Debauchee Kenju's body, and they were all completely exposed, and steam was coming out from them. And there were also countless smashed organs and meat chunks that were falling down. Both of Debauchee Kenju's mouths let out a tragic scream, one in a male voice and one in a female voice, letting out a sharp, tragic, inhuman shriek. Then, it suddenly stopped, and large amounts of fresh blood suddenly spilled out. Idiot! A murderous look flashed in all 4 Debauchee Kenju's eyes. He was severely injured. Clearly, he had went into a completely state of insanity. As his blood poured out in large amounts, although his body had already sustained a fatal injury, his enduring heaven body-destroying cloning method still allowed his strength to continue increasing. Pop! Lines of cracks suddenly appeared in the space that should be completely dead silent, as if some invisible thing had suddenly exploded in the air. Saint Venerable Lu groaned, a mouthful of blood spurting out of his mouth. His face was completely pale. It was obvious that the life spatial lock that he had constructed using his life force was broken by the opponent's brute strength. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1167. Life and Death. So ordinary. Facing such an immense impact, Saint Venerable Lu suffered significant injuries. But he did not falter. Just at the last moment Debauchee Kenju broke free of the shackles of the spatial lock. He brought his huge saber up again. And this time, a dazzling, white blade chi shrouded the blade. This was the Xian Chi saber stars. This sort of power was only seen when the way of the blade had reached a certain level. And this power was enough to completely annihilate even a holy infant. Similar to the life spatial lock, this was also an attack that used one's life force. Saint Venerable Lu had used all his might in this battle, because he knew that as long as he had the slightest hesitation, this supremacy enduring heavens might escape the next instant. Although my unexpected attack managed to wound him successfully and had even managed to crush all his 5 viscera and 6 bowels with my blade chi, but to a supremacy enduring heavens that has a double Saint Venerable cultivation, although this injury is severe, it is not fatal enough. As long as he has a period of time to rest, he will be able to completely recover with not the slightest loss in his strength. The recovery abilities of a Saint Venerable are terrifyingly unimaginable. Even if their entire bottom half of their body is destroyed, as long as their head is still on their necks, they will still have the chance of recovering. This is the real terrifying might of a Saint Venerable expert, a body that is practically invincible. So I absolutely must strike when the iron is hot. Only by completely killing this scoundrel in one go can we get this done once and for all. And I have the absolute initiative. This is the best opportunity to annihilate the enemy. Debauchee Kenju roared furiously, his organs all dangling out. All his 4 eyes were completely bloodshot. He could tell that this Saint Venerable Lu clearly planned to perish along with him. But because the opponent had succeeded in his sneak attack, successfully destroying his 5 viscera and 6 bowels in the first blow, even if he wished to use the stealth kill technique, it'd be too difficult. If I don't slay the enemy, I may really die here today. Even though I am a double Saint Venerable, only death awaits if I continue being hounded by the opponent. Furthermore, I'm already suffering severe injuries. If I try to escape, I wouldn't be able to outrun the enemy and will definitely be unable to escape. Dao Kenju made up his mind. If I'm destined to die, then you shall join me on the journey. With a sharp shriek, two blades went flying towards Saint Venerable Lu. The sword was also shrouded with the same blinding, white Xian Qi saber stars. Both of them had the same idea. If I'm going to kill you, I shall make sure I kill you thoroughly. I will show no mercy. With the clash of the three sabers, both of them turned more and more pale. They were both using up their life force, and no one relaxed. Saint Venerable Lu let out a loud laugh. He suddenly dodged and appeared on the side of both of Dao Kenju's body. Lifting up his saber, he chopped down with no hesitation. Dao Kenju chuckled coldly internally, striking with both his blades. One was aimed towards Saint Venerable Lu's dantian, and the other at his heart. He was striking at the opponent's vitals. As he had two conjoined bodies, the attack was even stronger than Saint Venerable Lu's attack as they were striking at the same time. Dao Kenju predicted that Saint Venerable Lu would not give his all, because he was already wounded. Although Saint Venerable Lu had used the life spatial lock and used up a significant amount of his life force, he was still in a better condition than Dao Kenju. The gains did not make up for the losses for Saint Venerable Lu if he chose to perish with the enemy. Although Saint Venerable Lu has the mind to perish with me, he will definitely not be willing to now, because he already has the absolute advantage. And in the contest between Saint Venerables, as long as one party retreats, it gives the other a huge opportunity. Even if the space was already locked by Saint Venerable Lu. But he had miscalculated. One wrong move and the entire game was over. Not only did Saint Venerable Lu not dodge the double blades, he let out a long cry and sent his chest flying forward to meet it. The saber in his hand had gained some strength as a result. Right now, Saint Venerable Lu had concentrated all of his cultivation on the saber. The Xian Qi saber stars on his blade was so dazzling that it was about to burn. Dao Kenju let out a cry in panic. The moment both his swords reached Saint Venerable Lu, he finally understood that his judgment was wrong. The opponent clearly intended to perish with him. His own plans to injure him and force him to retreat were completely pointless. He could no longer bother with attacking the opponent. The only thing on his mind was to retreat backwards quickly. Saint Venerable Lu continued to come striking down with no change. The sharp blade in the hands of Dao Kenju's female body stabbed mercilessly into Saint Venerable Lu's chest, accurately into his heart. Then, the other blade went stabbing into Saint Venerable Lu's duntun with utmost accuracy. These two blades were stabbed in at practically the same time, with no smallest obstruction. It was as if it had cut into pork, skewering right through with a whoosh. The Xian Qi exploded in Saint Venerable Lu's body. Boom! A thin mist of blood oozed out of the pores on Saint Venerable Lu's body. Saint Venerable Lu did not leave a single bit of strength to protect his own body. He had completely, with no reservations, channeled all his strength into his saber. And at the same time Saint Venerable Lu's body went flying into Dao Kenju, his saber, shrouded in the dazzling, white Xian Qi saber stars, went hacking right down mercilessly at the part where the two bodies were joined. Whoosh! The conjoined bodies were separated into two. Three bodies went spiraling down from the sky, perishing together. In the midst of the spinning, both the bodies of Dao Kenju finally got to look at each other, face to face. They both smiled bleakly. All that ruthlessness earlier had all disappeared without a trace. So looking at each other without being restrained feels this good. The female body of Dao Kenju laughed. There was no hysteria in her eyes, only gentleness. a gentleness that belonged to females. The male body of Debauchee Kenju was also smiling gently, as they slowly fell from the air. His eyes were locked on the female body's face. His look was also full of tenderness. If there is a next life, let's face each other and take care of each other, sharing our life together. The female's face flushed, a little embarrassed, but she gently reached out her small hands. The male Debauchee Kenju let out a loud laughter, reaching his big hands out to hold on to the hands of his other half tightly. Both of them closed their eyes together, breathing their last. Under Saint Venerable Lu's Xian Qi saber stars, Debauchee Kenju could not bear it anymore. His holy infant barely had the time to congregate when he completely vanished from the world. Although at the last moment of their lives, they were hoping to look after each other in their next life, but they were clearly aware that their spirit was already completely destroyed by Saint Venerable Lu's Xian Qi saber stars. They were destined not to have a next life. But before dying, to be able to hold on to the other's hands with no restraints, they were already content and had no other regrets. This moment is already eternity. Whether if there is a next life, does it matter? This conjoined strange races were both husband and wife, brother and sister. Under such an immoral relationship, both the male and female bodies of Debauchee Kenju had such a thick bond. Even till death, they did not look at Saint Venerable Lu a single bit. Since they're already destined to die, and even their souls will turn into nothing shortly after. Then, whether he lives or dies, what does it have to do with me? As to what vengeance, ideals, hopes, all these, is it still important to someone who has no future, who has no hope? It is really no longer important. And at the moment Saint Venerable Lu verified that the opponent had been struck, he instantly used the heaven reversal pill. He also did not bother to look at Debauchee Kenju. He had already been struck with all his might. It'd really not make sense if he survived, since the enemy was already done for. Then what was the meaning of looking at a corpse? It was more important to hurry and slay more enemies. Thus, the moment Saint Venerable Lu recovered, he instantly shot into the air and flew to where the rest of the supremacy enduring heavens were. He did not even turn back to glance, only leaving with a sigh. He had came here to stake his life. He had not even thought of returning back to Tianfa alive. Then, what was life and death? They didn't matter. They truly didn't matter anymore. His only wish was to be able to pull a few more strange races along with him before he died. As to whether they were good or bad people, was this important? So what if they're good? So what if they're bad? This was war. A war that determined two continents. There had never been right or wrong in war. It was only what the soldiers wanted to protect, what they viewed as their lives, or what the opponent wanted to destroy with all their might. Everything that had sprouted from this basis ultimately ended with one party surviving. It was just that simple. That was all. In the other direction, 7 supremacy enduring heavens were also suddenly intercepted by the other 7 Saint Venerables of Tianfa. Then, it was a huge battle. Life and death was determined quickly in the battle between experts. 3 pairs had already finished their battles and a victor was already determined. 2 Saint Venerables from Tianfa were injured, but they were still battling with their enemies after using the heaven reversal pill. And there was another Tianfa Saint Venerable who ultimately did not have the opportunity to use the heaven reversal pill before perishing with the enemy. The enemy had reacted in time, causing his sneak attack to fail, turning the battle into a head-on battle, and he had already fallen into a disadvantage. At a crucial time like this, The Tian Fa Saint Venerable had resolutely decided to sacrifice and self-detonate, ultimately pulling this supremacy-enduring heavens from the strange races along with him to the Yellow Springs. Although he did not gain from making this choice, at the very least, he did not make a loss. On the battlefield, sounds of violent explosions rang out ceaselessly. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1168. Brothers, wait for me. There were constantly some experts who, when they faced with an impossible situation, would choose to detonate their own life force to deal damage to their opponent. And many of them were Tian Fa warriors, with a number of strange races experts as well. This sight that could hardly be seen normally was extremely common right now. It was as if the lives on both sides were no longer valuable, and everyone suddenly did not care about their lives as much as they thought they would. In such an intense and merciless war, even the most cowardly soul here would turn into an indomitably courageous warrior. And right now, the Tian Fa warriors had completely gone insane. Most of the warriors from the Eagle and Bear army had already consumed their heaven reversal pills. Their violent nature as Xian beasts had already been thoroughly unleashed, and their bloody instincts were fully put to display in this war. There were constantly comrades falling before their eyes and brothers exploding into a rain of flesh and blood in the sky. Such an intense battle caused everyone to lose their sense of reasoning. Right now, there was only the enemy in their eyes. They only knew that they had to kill the enemies to take revenge for their fallen brothers. At the back, the 100,000-strong Strange Races army had already surged up like a raging tide, riding their strangely shaped horses and barging into this meat grinder of a battlefield. With a force that numbered several tens to 100 times that of their opponents, they completely drowned the Eagle and Bear army. The fight with the supremacy-enduring heavens was still raging in the sky intensely. The 5 remaining Tian Fa Saint Venerables were unleashing a deadly battle with the 5 supremacy-enduring heavens. The over 300 Frenzy Blade-enduring Earths had also plunged into the battlefield, shrieking and roaring fearsomely. The addition of this group of Frenzy Blade-enduring Earths that was comparable to the supremacy-enduring heavens had dealt a huge blow to the Tian Fa army as well as huge amounts of pressure. The balance between the two sides had completely tilted. Ever since this group of Frenzy Blade-enduring Earths entered the fight, the self-detonation rate on the Tian Fa army's side began to soar higher and higher. Only less than half of the original 6,000 warriors were remaining now. Yet another thunderous boom rang out in the sky, and the might of the shockwaves surged out, causing even the erupting volcanoes to tremble for a moment. A look of grief appeared on Saint Venerable Lu's face. Even without looking, just judging by the thunderous sound, he could tell that yet another old brother had left. And perhaps today, or even the next moment, he would be following right after that old brother's steps, treading onto the final stretch of his life. But he believed even more intensely. Whether it was himself, or those old brothers of his and even every warrior below, none of them would feel any regrets. Because this was the legacy of Tian Fa that had been for 10,000 years. This was for Tian Fa, not the continent. Though the body may perish, the spirit shall last forever. Never regret. The Eagle King swooped around the battlefield, his sword dancing madly around him. Although his sword had been made specifically for him by Jun Moxie with the power of gold, it had still been grounded to dust long ago from his frenzied hacking. Right now, this sword in his hand was already the 4th weapon he'd exchanged, and he'd already forgotten from whose hands he'd snatched it from. The Eagle King had also consumed the Heaven Reversal Pill a long time ago. Right now, his body was covered in tens of wounds, many reaching deep to show bone. However, he didn't seem to feel the pain as he rushed through the enemies madly like an insanely quick shooting star. Only Big Bear was still swinging that 1600 gene, ultra-heavy long blade around. The only difference was that this blade was now being used as a large hammer. The edges of the blade were already filled with countless chips. It was as if he didn't know the word fatigue. That large body of his was like a crane amidst a flock of chickens as he waded through the tide of enemies. The defensive abilities of the bear tribe were undoubtedly obvious. The morale-boosting effect of this Bear King was enormous for the TNFA army. Whenever a TNFA warrior felt exhausted from killing, they only needed to look forward, and they would be able to see the tall body of Big Bear still standing straight, roaring ferociously as if he didn't know how to be exhausted. Thereafter, everyone would feel an unknown strength rise up from the depths of their bodies. And so, they would grip their swords and continue fighting, continued slaughtering the strange races. This effect of the Bear King was something that the other Beast Kings could not imitate. Because the Bear King was an existence that was born to battle. That enormous body was as if he was a war god. This time, none of the hell-enduring ghosts or frenzy blade-enduring earths dared to use the stealth kills technique. This battle was no longer just a simple war for seizing the heavens with individual skirmishes. It was indeed true that the enemy could not see them when they turned invisible. However, their own comrades would similarly not be able to see them either. On such a battlefield, both sides were already in a state of frenzy from killing, and everyone only had the thought that everyone else apart from themselves was an enemy. If they concealed themselves, they would definitely be unable to avoid the hail of swords, spears, blades, and sabers. That was simply taking their own lives as a joke. And so, no matter how unwilling they were, they had to abandon the thought of any individual fighting and instead participate in a large-scale chaotic battle. In the air, Saint Venerable Lu dragged his crippled body and charged madly towards the enemy supremacy enduring heavens in front of him. His right leg had already disappeared at an unknown time. As for who it was that had chopped it off, that was no longer important to Saint Venerable Lu. The enemy facing him also roared savagely as he pounced forward to meet him. 13 of them had come out together this time to obtain the first major contribution to the war. A force of 13 supremacy enduring heavens. Just what kind of power was this? But to think that they had actually been stopped here by an ambush from TNFA's Saint Venerables. If it was an ambush by the three Holy Lands, they had complete confidence that they would definitely be able to overcome it. However, although these TNFA Saint Venerables were fighting in human form, they were truly a group of Xian beasts deep in their bones. Even before reaching the Saint Venerable realm, a Beast King's defensive abilities and offensive strength were already much stronger than the humans of those three Holy Lands. Through this battle, their side's 13 brothers were only left with 2 now. And they were all heavily injured, with greatly diminished strength. Although they were also only 2 remaining from the 8 Saint Venerables, and they looked even more pathetic than them, these 2 supremacy-enduring heavens still felt like crying though they lacked tears. 13 people against 8. And every single one of them had strength equivalent to 2 Saint Venerables. In essence, it was a force with 3 times the strength of their opponent. However, the final result actually turned out like this. Before they came out, none of them would have ever imagined that such a result would be possible. Roaring madly, he lunged towards Saint Venerable Lu. Right now, this supremacy-enduring heavens could already see that this terrifying old deer was most likely the leader of this TNFA army. All these schemes and calculations should most likely be his doing as well. And because of this hateful wild beast, 11 of his brothers had already been thoroughly destroyed in body and soul. They didn't even have the chance for a rebirth anymore. Hate. Even if he died, he must drag this detestable old dear down with him. That lunge of his fell directly into Saint Venerable Lu's wishes. Adding in this fellow before him, he'd already killed 3 supremacy-enduring heavens. That was a good enough profit. Even if he died, he would be at ease. The two drew closer to each other, both their eyes blazing with determination and madness. The both of them no longer had any weapons right now. Even a more sturdy weapon would have been destroyed long ago in a clash between Saint Venerable level existences. The both of them were charging at each other with bare fists. In the instant that the two's bodies collided, the two of them made the exact same choice: self-detonation. With a thunderous boom, the twos crashed into each other. Following that, a heaven-rending tremor surged out. The two Saint Venerable experts had chosen to ignite their remaining life force and spirit power. None of them had planned on returning alive. The only thing they were afraid of was that the other party didn't die. Not even leaving behind the slightest energy to leave a holy infant. The most dazzling explosion lit up the sky. This was the entirety of the two's soul's strength, leaving the most glorious spark of brilliance on this world. A powerful shockwave surged out, and within a range of several hundred zhang, even the ground beneath them was swept clean. A full 8,000, nearly 10,000 people of both sides battling below, were sent flying away like rubber balls. Quite a number of unlucky bastards were directly turned into a lump of blood and flesh, being scattered far away. Eldest brother. Saint Venerable Bear roared with grief, his mind suddenly turning blank. For 2,000 years, these 8 brothers had lived together, fought together, grown up together, ate the 1,000 evils and 10,000 poisons fruit together, fought in 2 war for seizing the heavens, fought against the 9 nether 14th young master, been sealed into the 9 nethers land for many years together. The 8 of them had traversed the mortal world together back when they were young. What manner of glorious affair had it been? And how loud was the fame of the 8 great saints of Tianfa? Who in this world dared to look them in the eye? If one of the brothers were bullied or suffered any wrongs, the others would surely back him up. Right now, apart from himself, the other 7 brothers had all perished in this war, dying without complete corpses. From youth till old men, when had they parted? How could they part? They couldn't bear to part. Even if there's only the yellow springs before my eyes, even if there's only darkness and emptiness before my eyes, I still want to accompany my brothers. If anyone dares to bully them, I will still take action. I will use my life to defend them. No matter when, no matter if it's the physical body or the soul. Saint Venerable Bear turned his head and looked resolutely at the only remaining supremacy-enduring heavens. Both his eyes were as red as blood, and his face was twitching insanely. Come on then. Saint Venerable Bear said expressionlessly. Hurry up. Don't delay the reunion time of us brothers. When he mentioned the word brothers, his eyes turned even more fiery. The faces of his 7 brothers appeared one after the other before Saint Venerable Bear's eyes, before dissipating into the distance. Saint Venerable Bear seemed to be able to sense the departure of his brothers, and an intense pain surged through heart. With a hoarse voice that came from his lungs and throat, he screamed, "Wait for me!" That roar was reminiscent of when his brothers pretended to have left him behind back when they were roaming the pugilistic world in the past. The same panic in his voice back then. It was still the same as last time. Brothers, wait for me. Let's go together. No matter what we're doing. No matter living or dead. Together. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1169. Mad Bear King. That supremacy enduring heavens before him smiled bitterly, his face filled with an understanding look. Old bear, can you not separate us? That strange and disorderly voice suddenly became clear. The female body of that supremacy enduring heavens did not say anything, but her eyes grew heated. Fervent, but gentle. Saint Venerable Bear's eyes trembled for a moment, and he said lightly, I won't separate you two. And I will also not separate from my brothers. My brothers are waiting for me now. I don't wish to keep them waiting for long. We feel the same way then. My brothers are also waiting for me. This supremacy enduring heavens laughed as he looked blankly at the mist of blood around him. Did you think that only you have brothers? Old bear. Come on then. Let us go on our way together. As he finished his words, that supremacy enduring heavens charged forward madly. Tien Fa. Last forever. Saint Venerable Bear's powerful voice shook the entire heavens, and dragging his huge body that was covered in wounds, charged forward to meet him. His footsteps were firm, and he didn't turn back at all. There weren't the slightest bit of attachment. In his heart, he was roaring. Brothers! Wait for me. Whether it is a mountain of blades, or an ocean of fire, this old bear will traverse it with you. Hong! The Bear King Big Bear, who was slaughtering madly on the ground, suddenly raised his head and roared. His face was filled with tears. Tears of blood. In the instant that the unusually resplendent explosion burst out in the sky, the volcano in the farthest distance suddenly spewed out a pillar of fire into the sky. This exceedingly violent eruption caused the entire land to rumble heavily. Everyone on the battlefield felt as if they were sitting on a small boat and facing a tsunami. The crowd raised their heads and looked towards the north, only to see that a volcano was spewing out lava that reached far higher than any other volcanoes in history, the pillar of fire reaching several thousand zhang tall. There was clearly several hundred li of distance between them, but everyone was still able to see the eruption with great clarity. This was the moment when Jun Moxie and Gu Han pushed Zhan Luanhui into the mouth of the volcano, and when Zhan Luanhui had charged back out of it. Zhan Luanhui falling into the volcano and dashing out of it had immediately ignited the most violent volcanic eruption in history. Ho! Big Bear raised his head and roared madly to the sky. The sacrifice of Saint Venerable Bear had caused this Bear King to lose the last shreds of his sanity. You bunch of motherfucking freaks. Die for this daddy. Hurry up and die. Big Bear's eyes were completely red, and the aura around his body turned exceedingly violent. With a heaven-shaking roar, all his muscles bulged up even further, and the originally abnormally large bear swelled up and doubled his size. Bear King seemed to be surrounded by a black mist, which seems to be extremely illusory, but clearly visible. The extreme opposite visual sense shocked everyone who looked at Bear King's strange change at the moment. A unique sound like a soul exploding suddenly rang out. This sound was seemingly not loud, and only sounded like a faint explosion in the deepest part of the soul. But in this bloody battlefield where screams and roars rang out all over the place, with loud booming sounds of volcanoes erupting in the distance, this faint sound was actually heard clearly by everyone. This was the sound of the advancement of a life form, overcoming all the sound of the contemporary world. A golden mist burst out from Big Bear's body, and before it could dissipate, his originally 3 zhang tall body, which had just grown to nearly 4 zhang, once again began growing. If he could be described only as a particularly tall beast just now, he was now a full giant. The clothes on his body, which had been stretched to the limit, started to stretch and rip apart. In that moment, every breath that the Bear King breathed out seemed to be a breath from the heavens. For Zhang Tal, he cast his gaze across the battlefield and roared at the sky. The winds and clouds began to change. Bear King Big Bear had, in this moment of extreme grief and continuous rage and pain, internalized all the emotions into energy in his body. In this extremely crucial moment, at the heart of a raging battlefield, he'd crossed through the 4th level Saint Emperor realm in one step, directly advancing into the 1st level Saint Venerable realm. This was an amazing breakthrough. But it was also an extremely inconvenient time to break through. No matter how one put it, this was an extremely inappropriate time to deal with the heavenly tribulation. Around him, tens of strange races experts raised their blades and hacked wildly towards Big Bear's enormous body. This target was simply too obvious, to a point where it would be hard even if they didn't want to hit him. However, their blades had barely touched him when they were instantly reflected back, the back of the blades smacking ruthlessly back onto their owners' faces. In an instant, blood flew everywhere, and men and horses fell down. The Bear King had broken through already, and the protective aura around him had also naturally advanced to the Saint Venerable realm. In addition, he had just broken through and couldn't control his energy properly yet. This was the time when his Xian Qi was the wildest. To attack the Bear King at this time had conveniently given the wild Xian Qi a place to vent. Naturally, the strange races ended up suffering. The blood-drenched and exhausted Eagle King looked helplessly at the newly advanced Bear King, lamenting endlessly in his heart. My dear brother, why did you choose this kind of timing to break through? How could you break through at this time? No matter what time you choose, it would be much better than now, right? A breakthrough means the invitation of a lightning tribulation. Right now, at the most heated moment of the battle, how could you hope to survive the lightning tribulation? Even more terrifying is that the lightning tribulation does not care if the people around you are friend or foe. It simply counts everything by the number of people. With the scale of this battle, just how terrifying would this lightning tribulation grow to? The Eagle King that had never known the word fear ever since he was a mere chick was now completely struck with fear. In the sky, huge patches of black clouds began to gather over with rapid speed. A large circle began to form in the sky, the pressure emanating from it reaching an inconceivable level. Big Bear did not take note of that pressure at all. Roaring madly, he raised up the enormous sword in his hand and charged forward. What is a heavenly tribulation worth? Who cares what it is? In this moment, Big Bear was not even thinking about the heavenly tribulation. He didn't even know that he'd broken through. Right now, the Bear King was only filled with endless rage. To fight. To kill. To slaughter. To seek revenge. Apart from that, there was nothing else in his heart. The Bear King's blood-red eyes were opened widely, filled with nothing but madness and savagery. Nothing else mattered. At this moment, Big Bear had already descended into a crazed state. Even if Eagle King was standing in front of him right now, he would probably not hesitate to swing his sword down at him. Big Bear strode out with huge steps, charging into the area with the largest concentration of strange races soldiers. His charge was like a red-hot knife, plunging into butter, sliding in with ease. Right now, he was charging into the enemy with his cultivation of a Saint Venerable. There naturally wouldn't be anyone capable of stopping him. It was like a massive tank driving into a crowd of ordinary soldiers. The shocking restorative powers of a Saint Venerable also allowed Big Bear a nearly inexhaustible source of energy. Right now, All 21 Saint Venerable level experts that appeared at the start of the fight had already perished. And so, the newly advanced Big Bear became the only Saint Venerable level expert on the entire battlefield. He was the most barbaric and the most unstoppable existence. With a wide sweep of his blade, blood spurted in all directions. This display of slaughtering was much more spectacular than before. The Eagle King covered his eyes, unable to bear watching any longer. As a good brother of several hundred years, how could he not be able to see it? His fourth brother bear had already completely lost his mind. He wouldn't be able to recognize anyone in his current state, whether it was him or the warriors of the bear tribe. Even if elder sister came personally, she might not necessarily be able to bring him back. Big Bear, whose strength had been greatly increased, would naturally not be threatened by these normal soldiers of the strange races. But how would someone who'd lost his mind be able to overcome the incoming heavenly tribulation? Tens of Frenzy Blade Enduring Earths saw how Big Bear was massacring their side and instantly charged over to stop him. Although the Bear King was already in the realm of Saint Venerable, and his strength far surpassed them as Frenzy Blade Enduring Earths, he had still only just broken through and his power was still unstable. If they combined their strengths, they still had the chance to kill this Bear King. Kill. 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 Ah 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 ah. Big Bear swung his broadsword like a machine, creating large patches of corpses with every swing. More than 50 Frenzy Blade Enduring Earth rushed up, forming an encirclement around him. Everyone's eyes were filled with killing intent as they stared at Big Bear. Even if the other side was a Saint Venerable, with so many of them here, they could definitely still cut him down. With a loud roar, nearly 100 blades chopped down towards Big Bear together. Just at this time, the tribulation clouds in the sky had finally finished gathering. With a loud booming sound, a bolt of lightning as thick as a bowl shot down. The lightning tribulation had actually arrived at such a critical time. The more serious thing was that the current Big Bear had completely lost his mind. What heavenly tribulation? He hadn't even considered it at all. The Bear King didn't even know that his newfound strength had been gained from a breakthrough. He only knew that having more strength was good. With this additional power, he could kill every last one of these freaks and take revenge for Saint Venerable Bear. For the 8 great Saint Venerable seniors. Ichoyu. With a ferocious roar, Big Bear dove forward like a hurricane, forsaking his defense and barging madly into the group of Frenzy Blade Enduring Earths. At the same time, the muscles on his arms bulged wildly, and the huge saw-toothed broadsword seemed to have morphed into a terrifying dragon. The lightning above him fell quickly, but as Big Bear was moving too rapidly, and there were too many people around him, that lightning landed squarely onto the spine of a Frenzy Blade Enduring Earth with a crisp ka-cha sound. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1170. Fierce Battle. Tribulation Lightning. This blade-wielding Frenzy Blade Enduring Earth didn't know whether he should feel honored or unlucky. The first bolt of tribulation lightning for a Saint Venerable was actually tasted by him, a Frenzy Blade Enduring Earth of only the 2nd level of Saint Emperor. The result was extremely obvious. Before he could even react, he was turned into a pile of charcoal. Big Bear, the main character of this incident, still did not know about the tragedy he'd left behind him. Laughing madly, he charged and moved like a hurricane, his feet not stopping at all. The only thought he had in his head was to charge with the sword in his hand, right through the middle of these 100,000 strange races soldiers, killing a path of blood through them, all the way to the end. Then, he would turn around and sweep through them again, repeating the same process until every last one of those freaks were destroyed. One truly had to sigh in admiration of young Master Jun's abilities. The huge sword in Big Bear's hands was the only weapon that was still usable in the entire Eagle Bear army now. Although it had been chipped and smashed, the power of this sawtoothed broadsword was still exceedingly terrifying in this battlefield. The Tribulation lightning fell like rain, and the thunder was so close together that it sounded like firecrackers. The fact that the first lightning bolt had missed seemed to have enraged the heavens even more. Like a maddened god, the Tribulation cloud sent out 3 more lightning strikes in a triangular formation. The sky lit up, and the lightning touched the ground in the instant that it was released. Such a terrifying speed was enough to cause anyone to gape with shock. But by the time the 3 bolts of lightning landed, Big Bear had already moved 5 zhang away from his original position. The Bear King, who was in an ignorant state, once again dodged the lightning unintentionally. 5 zhang was not considered a large distance, but it was enough to completely dodge the lightning. And 5 zhang around him, there were 10 Frenzy Blade Enduring Earths. They had just begun to attack when Big Bear charged right past them, roaring madly. While they were still figuring out what had happened, their enemy had already disappeared. At the same time, 2 of their comrades had been diced into 8 pieces, bleeding out on the ground. What was going on? This was simply too humiliating. Their eyes turning red with rage, they immediately turned around to chase after Big Bear. Seeing that big fellow waving his huge sword and madly reaping the lives of their species while completely ignoring them, these Frenzy Blade Enduring Earths only felt their blood rushing to their heads and an extreme humiliation. Even though those normal soldiers were only ant-like existences that couldn't enter their eyes normally, they were still part of the same species. How could they watch as others trampled so freely on their own people? But just at this time, the 3 bolts of lightning suddenly fell down, perfectly landing in the center of this group. With a loud pop, 3 of the most unlucky Frenzy Blade Enduring Earths directly stiffened as black smoke spouted from their mouths, falling down. Another 5, 6 of the Frenzy Blade Enduring Earths were blasted away, flying through the air uncontrollably. Being blasted away did not mean that they had lost their lives. However, as they happened to be thrown in the direction of the Eagle King who had been anxiously chasing after Big Bear to help him, they ending up being easily diced up by the latter. Ka-cha-cha. 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 On the ground, Big Bear had already gone completely crazy. The entire bear tribe had gone crazy, and the eagle tribe had also gone crazy. All the Tian-Fa warriors had gone crazy, and the strange race's army had also clearly descended into madness as well. In the sky, the heavenly tribulation seemed to have gone crazy as well. Everything and everywhere seemed to have completely turned insane. The tribulation lightning fell in groups of 3, raining down continuously. Later, they became more and more concentrated, before directly turning into cluster of 6, clusters of 9. They followed behind Big Bear, striking madly, falling like a storm. Several hundred continuous bolts of lightning could not land a even single hit on its intended target. Such a strange thing was something that hadn't been seen in billions of years. It's not clear if something like the heavenly tribulation had any kind of consciousness. However, if the heavenly tribulation had any consciousness, it would definitely be extremely pissed right now. Feck. What is going on? This daddy should have been able to strike whatever I want to strike. Even if you manage to dodge a few by luck, it shouldn't be to this extent, right? There's no logic in this. This unexpected strange development actually allowed Big Bear's killing power to increase by several tens of times. Towards the end, The lethality of his presence was several hundred times more scary than the original. The Bear King himself had only managed to kill a path in one direction. However, the heavenly tribulation had helped him to take care of the people behind and around him. The reason for this was that this fellow's unintentional movement was too fast. This kind of movement speed had already far surpassed the extent that his mind could bear, causing the heavenly tribulation to instead land on the strange race's heads. And this fellow was even intentionally moving towards the places where the strange races were the most heavily congregated. And so, the heavenly tribulation had no lack of targets to strike. This scene was simply too exhilarating. A huge, muscular giant bear wielding a giant sawtooth broadsword was wading through a sea of monsters, roaring madly while white froth flowed from the corners of his mouth. And behind him, he led a storm of lightning to smite his enemies. This kind of visually shocking image was something that could only be matched by modern-day guided missiles. This was a carpet bombing style of killing, using the power of nature. Cries of fear and agony rose up from the ground as countless strange race soldiers were slaughtered and turned into black ashes by the living calamity. Many more people were sent flying into the air, blasted away by the terrible explosions. Eagle King, who was following behind him, was completely stunned speechless. After being shocked for a long time, Eagle King spat and cursed. Feck. This works too. Could this be said that dumb bears also have their own dumb luck? Was there a need for me to be worried for him? The madly rampaging Bear King was still as indomitable and full of energy, barreling through the enemy ranks. No one was able to halt his steps, even for half a step. But after such a long period of exhaustion, even if his spirit was still as energetic, his body was gradually falling behind, unable to keep up. Saint Venerables might have amazing recuperative powers, but they were still mortals in the end. As long as one was still mortal, there would naturally be a limit to their strength. Especially for Big Bear, a newly ascended Saint Venerable. He hadn't adjusted to his power yet and was only expending his energy mindlessly, killing and slaughtering. Slowly, he began to feel tired. But at this moment, the Bear King was still standing in the middle of the 100,000-strong strange race's army. Because of the frenzied charge of Big Bear, the losses to the strange race's army was undoubtedly huge. This much was obvious and could not be refuted. The strange race's army was nearly scattered by Big Bear's charge, and large numbers of soldiers were fleeing in all directions. The number of enemies that had been fried by the lightning tribulation also numbered in the thousands. Not to mention the others. Over 100 of the current strongest experts among the strange race's army, the frenzy blade enduring Earths, had already been killed. So, although Big Bear was a little tired right now, there weren't many threats to him right now. The group of frenzy blade enduring Earths that had surrounded him earlier had already disappeared. None of them were fools. And those frenzy blade enduring Earths were even less so. What a joke! Who would dare to risk the dangers of a heavenly tribulation to deal with a Saint Venerable whose strength surpassed theirs by so much? That was not bravado, but complete foolishness, sending themselves to be killed and aiding the enemy. Those that had died by the lightning tribulation, weren't they just helping this crazy Bear King with his heavenly tribulation? And so, although Big Bear's speed was a little bit slower now, the enemies around him only took one look at him and immediately fled in all directions. The threat from the enemies were gone, but the danger from the lightning tribulation had reached its most intense moment as the tribulation clouds sent down 81 bolts of lightning at the same time. At this moment, the Big Bear that still hadn't come to terms with what was happening, raised his head and looked up, seeking for the place where the fleeing strange race's army had fled to, when a fat bolt of lightning exploded right above his head. The unprecedentedly intense pain nearly caused the ferocious Bear King to fall straight onto his B*TT. Big Bear was immediately infuriated. Feck. You couldn't beat this daddy in a proper fight, so you used a sneak attack. This daddy only slowed down to take a break and you treat this daddy as a sick cat? Big Bear roared with rage and raised his huge sword once again, cursing madly as he charged towards the place where the strange races were the most heavily congregated. Behind him, the thunderous clouds rumbled angrily, following after him. Seeing this walking calamity coming towards them once again with the lightning storm in tow, the strange race's army nearly wet their pants with fright. If this fellow was still a sick cat, even the most terrifying existences in this world would have to change their names to Sick Cat. Feck. We're people who waged wars for all our lives. But we've never seen anyone fight like this, with just the might of a single person. Even if you're a Saint Venerable, we won't be afraid. After all, we have so many people. Even if we only used cannon fodder to bite you, it will still be enough to crush you to death. However, the lightning tribulation around this fellow is not a funny matter, And so, roaring loudly, the Bear King traveled another 200 zhang in the blink of an eye. Behind him was a huge path of charred ground, and the fearsome heavenly tribulation fell like guided missiles. It was such a huge area, but there actually wasn't even a single piece of stone larger than a fist in that path. Right now was the final burst of the heavenly tribulation and also the time when its strength was the largest, and its area of coverage was the widest. This was the time when the killing power of the heavenly tribulation was the most terrifying. Hundreds of white lightning bolts the size of water vats rained down from the sky, and the sky seemed as if it was on fire as it lit up. This story will be continued to chapter 1171. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.